All right. So we haven't seen each other. We haven't been together in the same room since the 2009, right?
I got out 08.
You got out of it, so 2008. So 15 years.
Probably the Leaders Club at Lejeune.
Yeah, that's probably it.
The last time the platoon got together.
That was probably it. So for everybody watching that's unaware, all three of us went to Iraq together, Afghanistan together, and then got out. I served in the Marine Corps from 2005 to 2009. Sergeant Gregory here served from 2004 to 2008. And what's our rank now?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel Adam Lynch served from, what about 2004?
2003.
2003.
Yeah.
Through current.
Yep.
And what's your current position?
I'm a joint planning officer at the Joint Enabling Capability Command in Norfolk, Virginia.
And what do you do private sector?
I'm a training operations manager for Saab Incorporated.
All right. And Justin Gregory has just completed, as of yesterday, his first year of college. Prior to that, 10-year career in nuclear.
Nuclear security.
Yeah. Tell us about that. What did you do?
First, I was just a regular armed officer. Then I was a response team leader. Basically, you sit in the room with all the computers, assess alarms, distribute officers according to whatever the needs are, whether it's a medical emergency. And then after I spent 5 years on a tactical team, basically Op 4, opposing force, so playing terrorist, running drills, writing missions, upgrading security, the security strategy, training the officers, and I was a firearms instructor, taught tactics and firearms to the officers. So. But
15, 16 years ago, we were all like late teens, early 20s, and I had trained in Fort Knox, Kentucky, where all of us did. Mm-hmm. And I came to Camp Lejeune. I was the youngest one in the unit everywhere I went because I joined when I was 17. I went through everything like really fast. And so, and I got to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, to my unit after Fort Knox. And there was the entire Charlie Company, 2nd Tank Battalion, all the enlisted guys leaning off the rails on the 2nd floor and 3rd floor of the barracks, screaming fresh fish at us as we walked in the barracks. And I was wondering, like, what the hell I've gotten into. And I walk in this barracks room, and there's Greg. And you have an air cast on?
Yeah.
And it's like a Saturday or something. And he's got a case of Miller Lite and one of those camping folding chairs, a PS2 controller in his hand, and a hoodie on. And you were playing some robot. I still remember the game. It was kind of like Mech Warrior.
Yeah, it was something like that. Front Mission, I think it was called. Yep.
Just completely absorbed in it. And me and this guy, you familiar with him, Cordray, step in. And I step in that barracks room and I start unpacking all my stuff. This guy doesn't say a single word to me. And I get done. I've got everything out of my rucksack, all my SIF, all the gear that your standard enlisted Marine of that era was issued. And he turns around and he goes, "The fuck are you unpacking your whole fucking life?" And I was unpacking my whole fucking life.
Yeah.
And that was the start of what you go on to be my best friend. And we've been friends for 16 years now. And then the next day we fell out into our platoons, and that's when you took over your command of your first platoon of Marines. And you had gone through OCS and TBS, and you're staring, 18, 20 guys, and you're in charge of them. Like, live or die. You're going to train with them, go to Iraq, go to Fallujah. What was that like?
It was pretty intense. Prior to that, I had checked into 2nd Tanks in September of 2005, and my first kind of ad hoc platoon was all the guys that had just gotten back from Phantom Fury and Fallujah, which was even more intimidating than I could ever imagine. I've got these Lance Corporals that are just stacked full with their chest candy from being in Fallujah. So it was the platoon of either all the Marines that were getting ready to get out of the Marine Corps, or we're all a bunch of broke dicks, or all the misfits and behavior guys that were being disciplined. So I was trying to figure out where my place was with who was staying with the unit, who was going, and understanding that what these guys had literally just been through, everything that I was watching on TV, I'm now put in charge of these guys' lives. And my first platoon sergeant was then it was Staff Sergeant Britt Higgins. Absolute great American, great guy. Lives out in California now, coaching high school football. Still stay in touch with him, and he just kind of was like, "Sir," he's like, "I got the reins. It's like just come on my hip and just follow what I'm doing." And I was like, "Yeah, Roger that, Staff Sergeant. I'm going to shut up and color." I kind of knew my place and was not to come in too aggressive on these guys. And between him and Sergeant Jonathan Ball, I just kind of watched what those guys were doing, their demeanor, how they interacted with the other junior Marines, and I learned an absolute ton from those guys. And I kind of knew to look at the senior enlisted for my mentors based off of what the guys at 2nd Tanks were doing for several years before then. So when I actually, Charlie Company formed and I got my platoon, I still remember that first day. I think you were hobbling in to the quarterdeck with your boot on, and then there was D Hart.
Old Tommy Guns.
Yeah, old Sally. And these two are coming in here, and I'm like, real quick, getting those guys' names before we formed our platoon up that day. And I'm like, "How old are you?" And I was like, "You look not a day older than 12." With D Hart with his little baby blue eyes.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, "Good Lord!" I was like, "Here I am, 23, getting ready to, over the next year, prepare these guys to go to war." It was extremely intimidating, but it was one of those where it was like, you can't show any of that intimidation,
right.
That fear. It was just pure confidence to get in there. And I tried to be who I was just as a normal individual and just be kind of relaxed. Humor is kind of what I lead with a lot of time, whether I'm comfortable or confident or uncomfortable. So I just kind of went with that, and the rest was history.
Yeah. It's been wild to look back on that times with you and Frank and Moore, and kind of be on the other side of it, and then having myself grown into like other positions and like going and starting initiatives and being in charge of people and remembering how you guys handled it, and then just trying to emulate that. Because I definitely, at that time, I couldn't have spoken to what you're feeling, and I'm just dealing with my own stuff, But then you kind of discover it's like 33% fake it till you make it, 33% just figure it out as you go along, and then 33% genuine confidence because you've done your best, you've done your homework. It's like some conglomeration of all three of those in different points on different days. When I walked in that barracks room, you weren't in the best spot because you were supposed to deploy with the previous unit.
Yep.
And I could kind of tell there was something up with you. And throughout the period of like the next couple months, you kind of took the new guys under your wing as to be the one dude in the unit that wasn't a complete asshole to us 24/7. And I kind of saw everybody, like you took a leadership role amongst them. Like you were still an asshole for sure, but you were just more so than everybody else. And you kind of lifted yourself out of the kind of, the depressive episode of what you had endured, you know what I mean? Like by helping other people and helping us get ready and showing us the lay of the land and this is how this works. So tell me kind of like, what was that like for you? Like what was that experience like?
So like you were talking about checking into the fleet, not knowing a damn thing with a bunch of people, having all the list of guys yell at you and make fun of you and screw with you. Got in everybody that I came in through tank school that I knew and was familiar with. We all checked in and we're going to deploy immediately. I think we did, a couple months real quick of pre-deployment stuff. Throughout that time, we were about to leave. I think we were a couple weeks out. And I was screwing around with my buddy, Baez. I'll call you out now. We're screwing off and playing video games and we're play fighting, whatever. He tackled me and we're screwing up, punching each other in the ribs, and just rolled off the bed, and he landed completely on my ankle the wrong way, and it just sounded like a branch snapping. And I was like, what the hell was that? I didn't feel any pain. I immediately just started sweating. I was like, I'm fine. I stood up. I went to put up my leg, and I just boom, right down. And they both went, oh, shit. And I had snapped my leg. I had to get a titanium plate and some screws in. And it was rough at that time. You know how it was. If they found out that we had been screwing off, they were going to charge him. They were going to get him in a lot of trouble. So I was like, I just tried to jump over a chair and broke my leg. And they were like, okay. So then they were like, oh, you're malingering. You just don't want to deploy. And I'm sitting here trying to cover my boy like, no, I swear I'm not malingering. So
Who's that first sergeant? Who do we have? What was his name? Irwin?
For...
Irvin?
Oh, it was Ern Howard.
Yeah.
Howard.
Yeah.
I remember he used to
Sergeant
yell
Howard.
at you in the office, he'd call you Malinger.
Oh yeah. So I got immediately. I broke my leg, so I had to get put to the next group, and that's where I was with you. So at that point, I had my surgery, had my normal cast off, and had my air boot, whatever the hell you want to call it. And I was then assigned to the next company. I was like the only enlisted guy there at that point, right? I'm one of the few. So they said, okay, well, you can't do anything else, so you're going to be the admin guy. So I spent, I don't know, what was it, 6 months in the admin office, answering the phone, putting together rosters for these guys. I mean, scrubbing rosters, everything from, contact information, addresses, everything you think of, just spreadsheet after spreadsheet of like a company worth of dudes and
The
everybody
house
that
mouse.
came in.
Yeah.
The house
Nickname.
mouse.
Yeah.
After like what?
Yeah, I forgot.
The house
that.
mouse.
After like 5 or 6 months, like completing the training to go on a deployment.
Yep.
Right. And so you had a tank crew
Yeah, I was
that
ready
you
to go.
trained with, like probably knew from tank school.
Yep. Yeah.
Right?
Everybody I was in the whole tank school with, they all went to the next group.
Yeah.
So they all deployed while I sat back, and yeah, that sucked big time. Feeling like a broke dick that couldn't do my job, and then of course being getting screwed with, whether they're screwing off or not, being called a malinger, that sucks. Because you join the Marine Corps, you're going to Iraq, you want to go to Iraq.
Yeah.
And then so that sucked, but like it did give me, I'm so thankful in the end that that's how it turned out because of you guys, like who I met in the group. I was a lot happier in my new tank crew and the new group. And then, of course, I got an opportunity, we'll talk about that, whatever, about, when I got put to a gunner position. I was the only person at that rank to be able to do that in my first deployment. So thankfully, in the end, it turned out much better than I think the other group. And the other group had a bunch of bad experiences, of course. Lost some guys, some of my buddies from tank school, some real close friends of mine. So, there's part of you that says, oh, that sucks, I wish I was there with them. And then there's part of you that's like, well, I'm glad about the opportunities I had in the group I actually got to deploy with. I was thankful for that at the end.
Yeah.
But,
So then we all go through a whole nother workup, right? And your second one, our first one to go train, right? And how long did we, before Charlie Company was like, because we got there, when my tank class got there, you guys were kind of like waiting on us to get going.
It was about a year from the time that we really formed until we actually deployed.
Yeah, and there's some movements around in platoons for a little bit, and then we finally got set. Did tank gunnery out at SR-10. We didn't go anywhere else, did we? We basically just did SR-10, trained right there in North Carolina, and then just went. And that was a pretty wild experience, and that's kind of where our three experiences diverge again, because we were in 3 different platoons. We were first, second, and third.
Yep.
And started out, there was first, second, third in headquarters, and second, third, and headquarters were all in Habanilla to start. And it was just me and Gunny Jules and Moore and first platoon in Fallujah. And we really quickly discovered that was not enough tanks to support, because it's just 4. So a platoon of tanks is 4 tanks, right? And so we had this crazy op tempo where the infantry wanted tank presence in the city 24 hours, and tanks go out in pairs of 2, right? And so it was 12 on, 12 off, or 24 on, 24 off for months. And a lot of downtime, a lot of IEDs. My tank section with Lieutenant Moore and Staff Sergeant Ford, now Sergeant Major Ford, would hit 5 to 6 IEDs a piece before everything was said and done. And then your platoon was the first one to come over to switch from, it was like you and headquarters, right?
No, it's just us. So the CEO Fretwell at the time decided to rotate us. So my platoon went over to Habanilla, and then we were supposed to kind of take over that rotation and then bring then the other platoon, Dave Frank's guys, back into Fallujah. And then after literally only about 2 weeks of being in Habanilla, the RCT commander was like, "Yep, no, we're bringing all the tanks back to Fallujah." So then we turned over Habanilla, and then we all then moved back on over into Fallujah, and then we operated as an entire company out of Camp Fallujah.
Yeah, and it was so I've actually looked it up, and I don't know if you guys are aware, but we were in terms of American casualties, we were in the deadliest city in the deadliest province during the deadliest time of the war. Yep. Now, it wasn't kinetic like Phantom Fury, right? But in just terms of like American casualties, right, during that time period, it was due to IEDs, which were intensely frustrating, right? And like I think this kind of pairs into, because we were also there 1-6 probably had a similar experience when they were there in Ramadi. And then, so you this incredibly frustrating experience of, like you said something earlier, Greg, where we all joined to go. I think everybody here walked into some recruiter, talked to somebody, right? We joined the Marines because we wanted to go to Iraq, or wanted to go to combat, right? That's one of the things that I've experienced talking to civilians, especially so far removed from it, that they kind of are shocked by, right? They're like, oh wow, you knew you were going to go. It wasn't like, oh, I got picked and yeah, you wanted to go. We were all 9/11 happened somewhere around high school for us or in there, and you saw it on television and you're like, you got to go, and so we get there and you want to fight. You want things to be, you want Phantom Fury, you want what you saw on television, and then it's not that. It's just going down the road, and then all of a sudden this road's empty and the whole fucking road explodes, and comms knocked out. Are all my friends dead in that tank? I don't know yet. That type of experience. And then I know probably the most impactful thing I remember happening to the unit was probably in your platoon, when the RPG came through and burned the tank. What was that like for you that day as a platoon commander?
I felt absolutely, very vividly. We were sitting there at our little headquarters there at Camp Fallujah. We were just getting ready to do our evening patrol brief. And then all of a sudden here over the net, I think it was Top Castillo came out of our little COC and was like, hey, we got a white tank. I just got hit. They're having issues. So I run in real quick and start listening on the comms and hear that, hey, we got a tank got hit with something. Guys are wounded pretty bad, and started hearing all the CASEVAC coordination. And then we hear that it was 1st Battalion, 24th Marines was in the city at that point in time as the infantry battalion, and they were running a CASEVAC. So I immediately haul ass down the street. I remember this to the day because there was some, I don't know why it's vivid in my mind, but there was some unit on base, some freaking Pogue unit that was doing a costume contest. And so as I'm sprinting down the street, holding on to my pistol because it's flapping everywhere with the cheap freaking little holster that we bought from the PX right up there on Camp Fallujah.
The leather holster with the Iraqi
flag
on it.
The Iraqi flag on it. Yeah. Always was dropping my pistol. Absolutely useless. And there's people walking down the street in Halloween costumes. This was in January, February, and I'm just like, what the hell's going on? I run down there, to the Fallujah Battalion aid station, and I said, hey, I'm sure you guys are tracking. I've got 4 guys coming on in. Looks like they're hurting pretty bad, and they're already spun up, getting ready to go for those guys. And then I stand outside. I watch the gun trucks come on in, and these guys, from the time it took them to get from the Cloverleaf where they were at in Fallujah down into the aid station was the exact same time it took me to run a half a mile. Those guys were hauling ass. It helped save their lives. Get them into there, and they pull Jackson,
We'll back up a little bit. So what happened was an RPG came in and hit the ammunition compartment.
They were, for you guys familiar with, for those that are familiar with Fallujah, they were just coming out where the new bridge was at. It's kind of just south of the, on the west side of the city, just south of kind of the Pizza Slice and the Blackwater Bridge. And they were right where that little roundabout is, and they were just starting to head back to the east, coming back towards Camp Fallujah. And one of those just blown out high rises, the insurgents took 2 shots with RPGs. As they were moving, and they were the second Vic in line. So it was Gunny Dixon in his tank and Jackson in his tank, and they were moving. And then the RPGs came out from a building and penetrated the back bustle rack of the tank. So when those guys heard the impact, my guess is the month prior to Dixon's tank had been hit with a triple stack of 155s. And ruptured the rear fuel cell, and the whole tank caught on fire like that. Those guys were all able to get out of there. But when those guys then got hit, they saw the grease can and all their gear in the back on fire. So my guess is they heard, kind of thinking the exact same thing, hey, we got to get out of this freaking tank before it explodes. As they opened up their the TC's hatch and the loader's hatch, you really had to do it effectively. You got to turn around and face the back of the tank, just because how freaking heavy those things are. as they were doing that, facing the back of the tank, the blow-off panels blew off the tank. But they failed to blow off properly. So they only opened up a little bit, like a couple of feet. So it forced all the flames of all the main gun rounds going off down pretty much straight over the top of the turret. And right into those guys' faces, and then down into the turret. So Jackson, as the tank commander, Shamandre, he got burned pretty bad in the face, arms, third-degree burns, about 60% of his body for him. Same thing with Corporal Gray as the loader. Flames went in, hit him, and then down into the turret where Rochely was at in the gunner's hatch. I mean, he had some burns. So as McChesney and the driver's hole is hearing all this going on, he jumps out and he's able to help the other 3 guys off the turret of the tank. I mean, these guys are all still on fire. Be able to get him off the tank, and then they actually then got him into Gunny Dixon's tank. So now you got 7 guys in a turret that's only supposed to have 3 guys in there, not comfortably. They haul ass to the cloverleaf, and that's where the guys, the grunts that were over there with 124, got him out, got him into the back of their high back, and then hauled ass to Camp Fallujah to get him evac out of there.
Speaking of the 124, I've got a mural that I made in college. It's actually made out of a uniform that I wore in Iraq, and I've got the names of all the guys who died. There's 19 guys in that unit who passed away. One of them actually started an arms company called Calamity Arms after our tank. Old Charlie Fretwell, his call sign. Finally bought some notoriety there.
Years later. And
we're actually able to so actually a pretty interesting story here that ties into like your story. We had gone across the bridge to support Operation Iron River with some recon guys, and we were providing overwatch of this village. And my tank section was providing overwatch. They completed the mission. I would come to find out that I was actually in pre-calc with one of the Marines that was a recon Marine on that mission. And we knew each other for a year. And I was actually telling this story, and he was like, I was there. I knew him for a year. Nathan French, I'm sure you'll watch this. And we went to go leave, and Sergeant Oliveira instructed Lance Corporal Baumover to neutral steer in sand. to
know exactly what you're talking about.
I don't know what his rank is now. I know he's an officer in the Army. Boomer, whatever your rank is now. I was just going to assume you're a captain. Captain Baumover. Then at that point, Lance Corporal Baumover, Boomer, told him it was a bad idea. And then Sergeant Oliveira then informed him that he didn't care. They threw track. And then my tank had to hook up to Boomer's tank, and then trying to tow a tank through sand is an equally perilous endeavor. And so my tank started to throw track. Then we were stuck. We had to call, I think, you guys down from Hobb to come get us because we were over the bridge.
We never got there.
That was us.
Oh, it was you guys. You guys came. We got mortared. And our tanks couldn't move. So we just had to get inside the tanks and just hope they didn't get closer. And then we had to, I think you guys towed us up to Hobb. That's what happened.
To Fall Black. Right up there on Route Boston. Because then that's where the transfer system failed on my tank. And then I ended up running out, technically because it didn't transfer fuel. I ran out of fuel in my front pods. So then my tank actually runs out of fuel right there in the HESCO line going into Fall Black. Right on the west side of the Euphrates.
But bottom line, like we couldn't get back across the bridge, so we wound up having to go to Hobb. And
we're going to tow over the new bridge.
You can't tow over the new bridge because these fuckers are 68 tons apiece, and nobody trusts Iraqi engineering that much. And so then for that reason, there was no tank presence in the city for a hot minute, like several days, and the Iraqis got all like antsy about that. And about the time we got everything patched up in Hobb and then headed back to the base, headed back to Camp Fallujah, as we were coming over the new bridge, there's a troops in contact. And I would guess it's got a lot to do with the fact that they haven't seen tanks for like the past 3-4 days. And they fire a couple RPGs. They kill a Marine in 120, I think 2 Marines in 124 actually. But they just happen to be doing it as the tanks are coming across the new bridge. And so they pin them down. We're coming over the radio, and I hear Moore say, this Calamity, we're actually like 5 minutes away. Like we were on our way through the area. And then there was, 3 local nationals. Crashed behind an old, bombed out Toyota, and we rotated both main guns over the side and just incinerated them. And then I think it was their battalion commander flew over to Camp Fallujah later that day to say thank you.
Yeah.
There's videos of that on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can find.
Yeah, there is. You can go find them.
Main gun shooting.
It was pretty nuts.
Same thing with Moore's tanks getting lifted 15 feet in the air of that up in
Karma.
In Karma at the Lollipop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've got that one. I'll probably plug that in here.
Yeah.
That was pretty wild. There's a video that I'll post on here, but it's actually shot from the insurgents, and they put so much time and effort to put in these IEDs. They want to film them, and there's a video of the one tank piloted by Jeremy Moore and Baumover and Oliveira, and who was Montalvo.
Yeah,
they were all in there. And in the video, anybody I've ever showed that, they're like, oh, all those guys are dead. But it actually went off kind of behind the tank, which getting lifted,
power
68
drill.
tons is still, it was a drill.
They tried to use a power drill, still didn't build up a charge fast enough.
And people can't believe that nobody died, but there's a pretty bad TBI, and I think a broken ankle and separated shoulder, I think, or that might have been one of the other ones they hit.
What'd they say it was
500 pounds,
equivalent?
Yeah, 500 pounds of explosive, pretty wild. It was a culvert, and so you see in the video, you see most of the explosion actually goes out of the side of the culvert, and that was a long day. But they were all okay. I remember that day specifically, we rotated. The IED was so big, I drove over it, and it was so big that I thought it hit us because we had hit some smaller ones.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I was like, oh, one of these bullshit IEDs.
Pressure plate or something.
And then Ford goes, that's the one tank, and I'm like, holy shit! They're pretty far behind us. And so I turn around, and that's a scary feeling. I had that experience twice of the one tank's comms being completely knocked out. And at that point, I was really close with Boomer. I was really close. We lived in the same trailer. I loved them. You know what I mean? And their comms are out. You have no idea if they're alive or dead. We hit another one on the corner of Ethan and Fran. And Tipton was on my tank. And several months prior, I had given him the moniker Dirt Reynolds.
Yes.
And Moore loved it. And their comms got knocked out real bad IED on the corner of Ethan and Fran. And we're pulling up, and you're just hoping, damn, dude, you don't know if those guys are fucking pink mist inside there, And you're thinking, the worst shit's running through your head, you know what I mean? Fuck, dude, if they're dead, their families don't know, And we pull up next to him, and Tipton fucking lifts his loader's hatch, and you just hear on the other side, hey, Dirt Reynolds. That's how we knew they were all okay. Of course, Moore is kind of a dark guy. He might have made a joke.
Most likely,
It's I'm standing in Montalvo right now, Dirt Reynolds.
Yeah.
But you had a really interesting experience in Iraq. You had your gunner had a emergency situation with his family at home, awful situation, and then you had to step up, and that must have been wild. I couldn't have imagined just being asked to be a gunner out of nowhere. What was that like?
So I was driver. So when I first got assigned to my platoon, Staff Sergeant Pitsley at the time, I don't know why he took a liking to me, but he was like, Greg, you're my guy. You're going to be my driver. And when we did all the workups, did the gunnery, I was driving, so I was his driver. All the workups, deployed, and it was Sergeant Jimenez, great dude, huge asshole, but we loved him. So he was the gunner, and I had done one patrol where I had been in the loader's position. They had Ross drive, and he let me get in there for one patrol, for half a patrol on the way back or something after we knew it was clear, just to get me familiar. And I got sick as hell. Look, you're looking 100, 200 feet out minimum in front of the tank, so the tank's moving, and I got car sick as shit. And I was like, all right, I don't know if thank God I've got another deployment before I have to actually do this, right? So I had done it one half patrol. Then that Sergeant Jimenez, he lost some of his family in some freak accident where the car was on railroad tracks. He lost his 2 youngest. It was horrible. So he got sent home, and I remember that day, Staff Sergeant Pitsley came into my room and was like, hey, Greg, I expect him to be like, hey, we're getting a new gunner, we're getting somebody from first or second or headquarters or something, you know. And he goes, you're gunning now. And I looked at him, I was like, what do you mean I'm gunning? I've never done this, but I haven't done a gunnery, I haven't done anything. And he's like, yeah, I've got you. And at the time, thank God I had him. He was a master gunner, right? I mean, if there was someone that could teach you everything about that tank confidently to someone who really didn't know what they were doing, it was him. And
In country,
yeah, on patrols.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I got brushed in real quick. Every night after patrols, I would read the gunner's manual, and I would just sit on the tank for a couple hours every day when we weren't on patrol, learning the computer system, the box behind you, learning how the computer works and the settings. And thankfully, Ross, my driver, my man, like, he would be within there with me. He'd always be there with me. He'd always sit there and work through the stuff with me, and I was learning it and working through stuff together. And you know, he'd take over maintenance just so I could, you know, study and work on that stuff. But I got spun up as quick as I could. I learned everything I could on patrol, and that was it. I spent the rest of the deployment as a gunner.
Yeah.
Fresh out.
Dude, I remember that. Ross was a workhorse. That guy, would not quit working. Yeah.
Upstate New York farm boy, man.
Yeah, dude. Like, just fucking baling hay and changing track pads, dude.
Yeah.
I remember that specifically because that was a pretty weird time in my life. So I had just turned 19 when we made it to Fallujah.
Yeah.
And my mom kind of unexpectedly died. She was on a liver transplant list. Like, with we heard she was going to be okay. And I talked to her, told her I love her, everything was good. And then just got called in the office one day and got told, her life expectancy was days. And that was a super weird experience for like a 19-year-old kid, because at the time, like, everything you do in the Marines, from the day I stepped on the yellow footprints, you did like in group. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you got to catch a Black Hawk by yourself out of here to Alticate them. And then once you get there, there's like some tent where you just go hang out and you'll fly space available. And I'm like 19. So I'm like, well, who do I talk to once I get there? They're like, I don't really know. You'll kind of figure it out. Like, this is, and they're telling you where to go, but you're 19. And I've certainly, I've been on Alticate them for all 10 minutes coming through. Mm-hmm. And just kind of like navigating all that. I got on a C-130 with John McCain and Joe Lieberman. and a team of Navy SEALs, like lieutenants in the SEALs that were training, and they had some Master Chief with them who had tattoos down to his fingernails. And I'm sitting across from him, and he's like looking around at everybody, and he's like seeing, like, obviously, like, the government folks, and then everybody's like shiny collared, super high up, and then he's like, "What the fuck did you do?" Just some Lance Corporal just sitting in the back of the C-130, and I was like, "My mom's dying. I'm going home." And he's like, "Oh," he's like, "You in Fallujah?" Or he asked me what I did. He was like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I'm in tanks." He's like, "Oh, you're in Fallujah, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "A lot of IDs." I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "These guys are Navy SEALs. I'm training them." And then he kind of like sat back and was like looking at them, and they're all kind of joking. And he's like, "Hey, call these guys." And I'm like, "What, Master Chief?" And then they look over and they're like, "Just do it." Like, he gets a kick out of it, And I was like, no. Yeah. First of all, no. And he's like, no. I want you to do it. And they're like, "Just do it." I'm like, "All right, you guys." And he just laughed. He just won't stop. And they just go back to talking whatever they were talking about. And then I land in Al-Assad, change into that one pair of civilian clothes that you never thought you were going to wear.
All balled up and wrinkly.
All balled up and wrinkly, smelled awful. And then go to Kuwait International Airport, which was just like the wildest experience for a 19-year-old kid, grew up next to a trailer park in Tallahassee. Like, everything's marble, everybody's smoking cigars. There's these little dudes in blue suits that are like walking behind the guys, like sweeping up the cigar ashes. Got on a commercial airliner from Turkey to New York, and I sat next to a beat reporter that was in charge of Middle Eastern affairs for the LA Times. And so she's pretty like up to speed on everything that's going on and is asking me like a ton of questions. It's just a wild time. And I came back from that, came home, was home for 2 weeks, super wigged out that somebody in my unit was going to die while I was home. Literally felt like I was torn apart. You know what I mean? I wanted to be there for my dad and my sister, but at the same time, like we'd already hit 2 or 3 IEDs, and Montalvo had already gotten hurt. And like literally the way I describe it to people is just feeling like I was getting ripped in half, you know, because you want to be like in 2 places at one time. Especially at the airport. When I left the airport and I like physically had to walk away from like my dad and my sister, and but I wanted, part of you wanted to, like I wanted to get back with my unit. Like that's the worst day of my life. That is the worst moment of my life. Like I can vividly remember it. And I kind of decided on that long plane ride back, I had a whole row to myself, and I just like laid down and like slept, and I was like, man, I know what they're gonna ask me when I get back, which is like if I'm ready to go back out. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what if I'm better? You know, like, what if I'm a better Marine? You know, and like that's something nobody will see coming. And it's kind of like you're just kind of faking it. You know what I mean? Like you're just kind of like, hey, this is what's expected of me. This would be the optimal thing that I could do. I don't really have any other choices. I can complain. You know, I can go, woe is me. And so I landed in TQ and then went down to Habbaniyah, and that's exactly when you were going through everything you were going through. Mm-hmm. And you sat me down and you told me like, hey, you don't have time to process this. You know what I mean? Like your tank crew's coming back up. We had that our last replacement driver took over for me. I can't remember his name. The tiny little kid. Yeah. Really pale. Yeah. And Ford was like right up next to killing him when they got up there. Like Ford. He threw him. He threw him out of the tank when they got up there. He walked over to me and he was like, you know, like, tell me the truth. Like, you know, are you going to be all right? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm ready to get in there and start dishing out 120 millimeter servings of freedom, you know? And I like, and you'd sat down, you told me like, now's not the time to process this. As shitty as that is, and that's not what a therapist will tell you, but like, if you try and sit here and sort all this shit out, you know, like you're going to be not paying attention, you're going to roll over an ID, and you're going to have a whole other mess of your death or other people's death on your hands. So that's where we really bonded. I think that's where like our friendship really kicked off. But 3 pretty wild and different experiences in Iraq, but all in the same tank company in 3 different platoons. Mm-hmm. What was coming home like for you guys?
It was difficult. I mean, I remember getting back to Lejeune and have my family there, and like my brother had some deployments under his belt with the Marines as a pilot, and then my mom and my dad were there, and my brother was living down in Hampstead, so they all pushed back down to there. I went home. All I wanted to do was go to sleep and just like sit in a quiet house, and just try and figure out what had just happened in the last 7 months. Mm-hmm. But I was like, you know, got to put the face on, drove down, like 45 minutes down to my brother's house. And when I got down there, all I wanted to do was just go home and be in a quiet room. And my brother kind of saw it after a couple hours of me being there. My parents saw that. And I was like, hey, I just need to go back home. My mom was looking at me. She's like, you all right? I was like, yeah, I'm good, Mom. I was like, you know, like it's Adam. Like I'm still here. I need some time to comprehend all this. Yeah. And then so went home and then was good to go the next day. And it was about a week later. We were partying up down in Wilmington with a bunch of other lieutenants. And it hit me like. We were at this bar and we were down in the basement and we were dancing and drinking and all of a sudden like the DJ put on like some Arabic music and immediately brought me back to like morning prayer and all of that. Mm-hmm. And I just started losing. I just started crying and I was with my buddy Brian Altieri. He was from Scouts. He had just gotten back. And another buddy of mine, and they were like, dude, just go outside and hang out for me. And I called one of my other buddies, that was a former Marine, and just like for an hour, just bawling hysterically up and down the streets of Wilmington. And I'm like, I cannot stop crying. And I mean, it was just, you know, survivor's guilt. Yeah. And I remember coming back that weekend on Monday and like pulling all you guys in and being like, hey, like this is what I just experienced this past weekend. Yeah. Just to kind of air it out there, because it was at that point in time, it was what I felt was the right way to be able to like, hey, like, you know, I'm having these issues, even though we all made it home. Some of us didn't make it home the same way we left, but like this is what I was experiencing, having to bottle everything up for 7 months.
Yeah.
That was the time to process it.
Yep.
And then talk to you guys about it and be like, hey, like, you know, from me, this is what I was feeling and affecting, and this is how it impacted me, and who else is having this stuff, or be able to talk about it openly at that point in time.
That's a big
Yeah.
leadership thing to do that and say, hey, it's okay if you're having these issues. Just work through it. We're here. We're all doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, same thing happened to me when I got back from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I almost got into this huge bar fight with a good college buddy of mine, T-Bird. And he's doing amazing in his life right now, kind of back in the snowboarding industry, what I used to do in my prior life before the Marine Corps. But his brother was a Marine, and we started talking, and we were just fresh from Afghanistan. This was December over Christmas break, and we'd been home for like a month. And we started talking, and everybody was absolutely wasted, and he starts kind of bad-mouthing the Marine Corps and how it's a bunch of degenerates and all of that. And then everything we went through in Afghanistan, I blacked out and lost it and started to go after him. Luckily, it was a pretty packed bar, so my buddies pulled me away from him before I could start to really do anything. And bouncers are pulling me out, and I'm like, and one of the guys was one of the bouncers. I remember he was a former Marine, and he was like, dude, just like go out and relax. And then I called my wife Katrina. We were dating at the time, and walking in the frigid temperatures in December in Laconia or Lincoln, New Hampshire, back to this house we were staying at, freezing my ass off, just bawling again hysterically. It just kind of was the survivor's guilt that was the way that I was able to, you know, kind of comprehend and absorb what we actually had done over there.
Yeah. So you just like, he's like saying the Marines are degenerates, and you're screaming at him like, I don't disagree with you, but I'm angry about it.
Yeah, I'm not angry about it. You are 100% right.
You don't have the right to say that shit.
Yeah, but he was saying a bunch of stuff I'm sure he didn't mean.
Yeah.
But I was pretty drunk. But yeah, I blacked out and then started going after him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I really don't remember a whole lot about between Iraq and Afghanistan. It feels like I kind of did the usual enlisted asshole Marine thing, and we just drank and had fun, forgot about that shit. You know, I had stuff that bothered me, of course, but
played hungover football at Fort Stewart.
Yeah.
During the MEU
I
workout.
don't remember where that was. I don't remember. It's just miserable. I just remember being miserable and cold and getting pissed on for days up there. But no, I really didn't. I don't know. I guess I didn't process as much as I should have. After Afghanistan, I processed for sure. That was a reality check. We can get to that.
Like we got home,
right?
That whole op tempo at the time was just unreal, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's one, you know, like the fact that you're able to say like, hey, this is how I felt this weekend. I had this experience. Like nobody was doing that back in 2006. Mental health wasn't a thing.
Nah.
You know, it was just like rub some dirt on it, quit being a bitch. You know what I mean? Like, you know. So one, like, props to you for being progressive.
That's very who I am. Yeah.
Well, 2006 progressive is 2023 far right. So
Fair. But I mean, think about everything back then. I mean, but they didn't have TBI protocols. They're like, hey, you good? All right, he's good, guys. Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, rub some dirt on it, take these pills, and keep on pushing.
Hit him with the smelling salts and let's go.
Yeah.
And then too, just the op tempo, because we came back and then we were out at 29 Palms doing desert warfare training.
1 month.
M1A1 desert warfare training after just getting back from a desert war in M1A1s. A month later.
Yeah, we just formed the platoon, and I remember I was on pre-deployment, post-deployment leave, and I got the phone call from like the battalion OPSO, and it was Colonel Bianca calling me, telling me that we were going to, they were pulling us back early. We were chopping. We weren't going to chop to the MEU, and we were going to go to 29 Palms and go do a back-to-back Mojave Viper.
1.5.
All of 1.5. Yeah.
It was like all of July and August, I think.
Yeah, I remember sitting there out at like range like 220, watching the fireworks go off down at 29 Palms.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. And we were all in the field. Ross Seymour had bought one of the first like flat screen phones with it was a Windows phone, so it had like the Windows operating system.
He is a tech connoisseur. To talk to somebody.
He was the first one to get the hard drive.
He called it the Mega Man phone, and he had he had his like Boost Mobile, internet service. We were out in the desert, and everybody was on Hot or Not. the website.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I forgot about
Trying to talk to girls in Yucca Valley. trying to
98% of them are like old fat dudes.
trying to line up some action in 29 Palms, and during our double CACs. From a temperature extremes, like that deployment and training was unreal. Like we didn't get anything too cold. Pickett was pretty bad, but it wasn't.
I hate it. I'll remember that.
Pickett was the worst.
That was the worst. Just getting rained on for.
Days.
I mean, it was like
Cold,
a week
too.
and a half.
Cold rain.
You couldn't get dry. Like we tried to wrap ourselves.
Sleeping in
like,
the bustle
tarps
rack.
and
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Remember, we tried to make these tents off the back of the racks,
Yep.
and you just get the water would just come in underneath theirs, and you weren't getting.
You became
stay
intimately
dry.
familiar with exactly how many holes your tarp had.
Oh
Yeah.
Yeah.
How bad your turret leaked.
Oh, dude. And then you learn from some of the old times. Remember, Pignac taught us how to set up the turret so like one person could actually sleep
Yeah, lie down. Yeah.
somewhat comfortably
Yeah.
in it.
Oh,
yeah. And we had that one night. Oh man, Ross got like you went to go wake him up. And
You want me to tell that? So at the time, because I was whatever you want to corporal of the guard, whatever you want to call it. So I was making
COG.
sure everybody was going. Everybody. All right, here's the roster. Here's your hour. Here's your hour. Here's your hour. Everybody go with that. Cool. All right, let's start. You start. Don't wake me up unless there's an issue, right? So I can't remember who it was before Ross's turn to be on duty. So we're all out in the field, and we have all our tanks all pretty much ass to ass with our little camp in the middle, trying not to get pissed on. And I remember somebody waking me up. Here, Cobra Greg. Shh. I can't find Ross. It's his duty. I'm like, all right. So I walk up to our tank, and I can see there's light on. You look down, and you can see the periscopes. There's some light in there. And he's like, I was like, he's in there. And he's like, yeah, but he won't answer. And I was like, yeah. I climb up on the tank. I can smell cigarette smoke. And I'm like, this motherfucker. So I just start stomping on there. And when you disengage the lock on the hatch, you let go, it will fly open, because we're on a hill. And it just flies open, wham, locks. And he's like, what's up, Greg? And he's lit a lit cigarette. He's got 2 bottles of JD on each side. One's like half empty, and one's like all the way empty. And he's lit. And I was like, go give me those. I threw them up. I closed. I slammed the hatch shut. I was like, you son of a bitch. I got you this time. So I stood his duty that night. And that was
I don't think I knew that.
Night. No, you did not.
I definitely did not know that.
Things we made sure you didn't know.
do you know?
Noted.
Do you remember?
Got
Do you remember the time
And JP coming, Ross.
Oh yeah.
we were supposed to get on the boats for the 3-day exercise?
Oh my
and
god.
they didn't have the space for all 4 tanks.
I
right?
lost my freaking mind on that LCAC that day.
Okay.
I hated you for that day.
Yeah, we were all
Him
hungover.
and I hated
You
you.
had-
Well, you were. I wasn't as hungover, but then I put you guys down in the box, and I could
that's why we
see.
hated
Oh
you.
yeah, that was absolutely miserable.
Dude, okay.
Ross was up there living life, and him and I were suffering.
This is one of my favorite stories because that night Ross got we all got obliterated.
Yeah.
So you called and you called Greg, I think, in the barracks because everybody else lived out in town, and we were all like getting ready to turn in for the night, be good little Marines because we have this fucking zero dark stupid thing we got to wake up and go do, and I think we were all hanging out with Greg. I think we were drinking a little, by having a couple beers,
Couple nightcaps.
And his phone rings, and he's like, "Oh, all right." And then Greg looks at us, and he goes, "That was a sir," and ops off inclement weather, and everybody just fucking sprints to the 7-day store, right? Because it's like we're not doing shit tomorrow, like because everything's staged, right? So we are now seasoned fucking skating Marines, and so we know
Bottles
we're not
and
gonna.
cases, baby.
There's right, and so we're like tomorrow's like basically a day off.
Yeah.
So we get obliterated. I've got pictures from that night. And then you call back at like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock. You're like, hey, it's back on. So you call Greg and tell him that the op's back on. We get that call 2 in the morning. Everybody's like sprints into bed, right? Seymour is fucking walking around the bear, waking everybody up, covered in piss.
But in uniform.
But in uniform, right? And then we pile in, we get down the tank ramp, and we just like me and Greg just fucking weekend at Bernie's fucking Seymour down to the ramp.
Yep.
Past a bunch of officers and staff NCOs, just like, it's dark, you know. Fucking pour him in the driver's hole. And we know we got like 3-4 hours before we're even fucking moving.
Yeah.
And so we're like, all right, he's got time to like sober up, just keep him down there.
Yep.
So we mount all the weapons, right? Do up, and then you hop in. You hop in, and you're like, Seymour? Fuck. Let's get out of here, Seymour. Nothing.
Ross, wake up.
I look down, Greg's fucking kicking like as hard as he can, trying to get him to wake up. And then you just fucking hear the tank like kick back, and then Ross goes, "Oh, comm helmet was unplugged."
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yeah, whatever, Ross, let's go." And we get down there, and like, dude, Greg and I, like, the real hangover is starting. You know, it's you getting past the drunk stage, and like it's just bad. Mm-hmm. And so we pull up to the LCAC, and there's all these, you know, squids, and they're fucking they're telling us that we're not allowed to help them tie our tank down.
Yep.
And so we're like, okay, cool, you know, fine. And then you invite Ross, who is the most drunk out of all of us, up to where he can see and like have a good time. And me and Greg were like livid about that. He's like, that son of a bitch couldn't stand 5 hours ago.
Yeah. Explain though, like the LCAC, it's a giant hovercraft.
Right.
That you drive the tank on.
We were doing this training exercise, and we were supposed to deploy onto boats here and go float around the Mediterranean and, you know, the Middle East. And so you have to put the tanks onto these giant hovercraft, and you have to strap them down. And so we were training to do that. We're going to go live on the ship for 3 days, and we were going to get on the ship by riding on this LCAC, this hovercraft, into the bay of the ship. And so there's 4 tanks. They're all on 4 LCACs, and we're getting ready to go. And just before, like, so this thing was canceled due to inclement weather, so the seas were rough.
Yeah.
Right?
Real rough.
And Greg and I have to go down into, like, the crew holding area. A fucking black puke box of doom is what I called it.
It was like a 10x10 box with no windows.
No windows.
Half the size of your bathroom.
Fucking reeked like kerosene.
Oh yeah. All the fuel, no windows.
And it's just
no climate control.
It's just me and Greg strapped to these 2 seats, and I ate an MRE because I was like, I was that weird hungover, like eating something might help, you know. So I ate like half of a chili mac MRE. I had the bag in my cargo pocket. I'm sitting next to Greg, and there's these 2 Navy guys sitting across from us. And this fucking boat ride just goes on forever. It just never, it just never ends.
Because we're circling.
We're just cutting squares, yeah.
Yeah. So it turns out, like, there was no room on the boat, and so we were just out there circling forever. But that, and you know all this up there in the in the nice bubble.
Yeah.
But Greg and I in the puke box are just like looking at these, like, just all glossy eyed. And I pull out my MRE bag, and I'm like, Greg, I'm about to fucking puke, you know. And Greg's next to me, and he grabs my hand, and he's like, "Hey, man, you can't puke in that bag, because if you puke, I'm gonna puke, and there's not enough room in that bag for your puke plus my puke." And like, I'm just like listening to him, and I just
Dude, we're holding the bag like this.
Yeah.
We each have a side.
Oh my God.
And our faces are touching. We're both like this.
and Greg just goes, "Please swallow it." And I'm like, and he's like,
Can imagine what those squids were thinking.
so Greg goes, "Thanks, man. I love you." And then, like, we are reminded that there's other people present. Like, within
We're having a moment here, guys.
listening
You look away.
distance. And I look over at him, and one of the guys just goes, "What the fuck?" And then, like, we're just literally time traveling, hurtling through space, and then we feel this thing land.
Dude, the whole thing's doing this.
Yeah.
Well, you have those seats with the suspension.
We don't want to hear
in there.
shit from you.
We don't
This is
have
the worst
crap
day of my
dealing with
life.
it.
So
on the
we're
top
like,
side.
our spines are compressing with every wake we're hit.
Oh,
So
yeah.
the other thing is, it was so the water was so rough
It's
that
just-
we couldn't even get onto the ship.
There's
right?
a multitude of factors.
Oh, well, between that and then all I'm thinking is that we didn't do a good freaking burrito wrap on our gear, and our gear's getting soaked, and then our sleeping
on
system's
top,
on
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I was like, I was like, this is absolutely miserable, because
Yeah.
I also had all that. So I'm just watching our tank get doused with salt water.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is going to be absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then fucking me and Greg have no idea, no comms down there. Nobody's telling what's going
No,
on. So we
yeah.
just feel the thing stop moving, and we open the door and we're back on the beach, and we're like, "What the fuck, dude? Like, did we take acid last night? What happened? What is happening right now?" And then you come down and you're like, "Yeah, we're not going on the boats. Take it back to the tank ramp." And then we just like the guys who were on the boats, they were on water rations.
Yeah, so I pushed back. As soon as I found out they weren't going to be able to fit tanks in the boat, even though we planned on it, so we just sent 2 tanks back. So I pushed you guys back. I went back on the LCAC, went back to the boat, and then that's where Briz met me, and I was losing my mind. I was pissed that somebody had failed proper planning.
Yeah, geometry.
Yeah. So then I'm stuck on the boat for the 3 days as they're just cutting gator squares, and then we're all the boilers broke, the saltwater to freshwater conversion broke, like it was just miserable. So and they're like, well, what are your tanks going to do back? It's like they're going to do maintenance. Like don't worry about it. So I think that's where you guys actually pulled the turret off the. Because we had to change like the felt seal and all that type of stuff. So
that's what we did.
Yeah. Well, not you guys. Yeah, you guys recovered for 3 days while Whitey and the guys did all the maintenance. Yeah,
we deserved it for that
showed
ride.
back up because they went on board hungover, yourself included.
It
and
sucked.
You're on water rations and there's no hot water and you can't and you're hot racking.
Yeah,
this is bad time. And they show up, they're like, this shit's been miserable, and we're all like, this has actually been really dope these past 3 days.
Yeah, you guys get a 96 out of it.
Yeah, it's been really great. So we have this kind of like really wild, but also like bonding experience. We're all Fort Pickett, Virginia, the exercises in North Carolina, 29 Palms, double CACs, right? 29 Palms is insane, 130-degree heat.
The only time I ever almost went down for heat stroke. You remember looking down at me and going, Greg, are you okay?
Yeah.
And there was sweat under my gunner's seat.
Oh, yeah.
Pulling up. That was a rough one.
And then we're supposed to go on the MEU, which is like there's boats and we're on them, and there's artillery and an infantry battalion and AAVs and all the accoutrement that you need to kick in the front door of a country in 24 hours. And we find out like 2 weeks prior to leaving that we're not doing that. Lieutenant Colonel Xerxes comes out and announces that we're going to war to fight in Helmand Province. And then the immediate thought from us was there's no tanks over there.
Yeah.
And so we all kind of look at you, and then you're like, I don't know. Well, what was that like for you? Just because I know you had the lack of answers for a while, but they were also dealing with so much on their end that we were an afterthought.
Yeah, so I remember we were on Christmas leave, and I got the call from Todd Mahar, who was the OPSO for the time. He's actually the commander for the 24th MU right now.
Okay.
And he was asking me all these crazy questions about like, what's the pitch and angle for the max elevation of the gun tube? What type of off terrain can you handle? Like all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, sir, I was like, what's going on? He goes, I need you to come in a day early from leave. He goes, all officers have like a 06 intel brief. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is not good. So find out, hey, we're going to Afghanistan. We're not sure if we're taking tanks. We're not sure if we're taking tracks. We're going to figure it out. And after a couple of days talking with Colonel Henderson, now Brigadier General Henderson, we get the word that, he's like, Daddy loves tanks. Daddy loves tanks. It was his speech. And he's like, yeah, but the Marine Corps doesn't. We can't take tanks. Yeah. And I'm like, what are we going to do? He's like, we'll figure it out when we get over there. I'm like, that's a typical grunt thing to say. Like, we'll just do it. I'm like, no, like, I have a 70-ton armor, sappy plate that I'm used to having around me. Like, we're not taking tanks. What are you talking about? And then, sure as shit, he was like, yeah, no, we're not taking tanks. We're not taking tracks. We'll figure out your job when you get over there. And then that was like, okay. So then I had to tell the 2nd Tank CO all that, and then kind of figured out. And we're like, hey, well, I know we're not taking tanks, so guess what? Like, let's just start running a gun as grunts and get to the machine gun ranges and kind of figure it out. And let's take BZOing our M4s a little bit more seriously this time because we're probably going to need them. And figured out from there. And that was a rapid, just a couple of week nut roll to get all that spun up and then get everybody ready to mentally and physically to, shift from floating around the med and partying up over there to running a gun in the desert of Afghanistan. So that was a great time.
And then we deploy. And we get there. We eventually get our gun trucks. We would just wake up one day and they're just outside the tents.
Yep.
And one of the things that was super interesting, I remember when we first got like troops in contact that morning, it went from like nothing to just fucking World War III, right? Like 155 artillery, mortars, like troops in contact all over the place. And
those Chinese 107s, man. I'll never forget that sound.
Yeah. And it was a really, I don't know how many other people had the exact same thought, but I talked to some guys that did. And it's like how different it was in Iraq. And pretty much everybody on that deployment, with the exception of like, some of your PFCs, but even most of you, because it was a MEU, most of your like lower enlisted were still like OIF vets, like at least on one deployment. And
Ramadi, right?
Yeah, Ramadi, Fallujah, like, you know, everybody. And everybody had this experience of like fighting the insurgents in Iraq. And it was a totally different type of warfare. And everybody had friends that died and went through that frustration of not having an enemy to attack. So when we encountered an enemy that wanted to fire a maneuver, that had built-in machine gun nests, that had comms, that were, you know, appeared to be like trained and dedicated at least to the mission they wanted to accomplish, which was harvest as much opium as possible and get the fuck out of town. Like, it was like game on, you know. That was the attitude that I picked up on. Like, all the guys were like, I've been wanting to. It's like, you know, sit riding bench for Alabama for 3 years, and then quarterback goes out, and like, we're like, this is what we were here to do, and these guys want to do this, and we've got everything that we need. We've got we've got Cobras, we've got Huey gunships, we've got mortars, we've got, you know, so that was a pretty wild experience to just kind of get thrust into that. I don't know, what was that like from you guys' perspective?
So I guess, like you were saying, it was chill. We landed in got into Dwyer. We got into Dwyer before. Well, we did the whole 23-hour road movement from Kandahar to the British base before Leatherneck was ever put up.
That was brutal.
That was a miserable long ass ride. It was a whole day ride, and then so we chilled out, slept for a couple hours. All the Marines got kicked out for trying to check out the British chicks over the wall. Ate our last pizza or whatever from the little trailers, and we took off, and we were the first ones to get to Dwyer right before everybody else from 1-6. It was just us, and that was when we traded all the British gear and stuff and met all them. And
with Charlie Battery.
So hung out with them, and I remember like just the Brits, man, like all hanging out drinking wine around the artillery piece lighting loom, you know, just like hanging out having fun. It was like, okay, like
in issues,
I guess it's not that bad.
Cargo shorts and sandals.
Yeah, exactly. Like just chilling, and we're like, okay, I guess this isn't that bad. Like everybody's talking about it's gonna be this huge big thing. Well, then we take off, we get over the river, we go see that compound with the Afghani flag, and once we get around there and we pull up along this river, and that's when hell just absolutely broke loose.
Over the bridge.
We had 3 or 4 RPGs that had hit their max range and detonated like right over our freaking heads. Just wham, wham, wham. And it was like, holy shit, this is real right now. Because we had been in tanks. You know, I had seen so many RPGs. I remember the first time the first guy I got, Up Route Dave, shooting my coax. I could see him from so far away, and the RPG's just going over, and it hit the building behind us, and it exploded, and it wasn't that loud. And I was like, okay, that's not that bad. So when it was right over our heads, real life, in the turret, it was like, holy shit, this is real. This is game on. And Ross was sitting there spotting with his binos, and he was on the radio constantly trying to figure out who was where, because it was absolute chaos at first contact, right, when we got in there, because the other 2 platoons were south of us, inserted by Hilo that night.
Yep.
Everybody was in contact. We couldn't figure out who was where. We were trying to figure out, lanes of fire to not engage our own guys, and it was super chaotic. And I just remember that, like you said, it was like all of a sudden, okay, this is game on. And from there on, it was just like, how quickly can we empty our trunk of 7.62? Like, that was it. Ross just kept get more boxes, and just, all right, Greg, they're saying engage that, and just laying down as many rounds as I can. And then we made our movement all the way down south. I think we linked up with 2nd, I don't know.
With, it was a Bravo company.
Redskins?
Yeah, but not Redskins.
We hit Redskins, started headed south, and at first we were doing it real slow. We picked up some dismounts and moved down there. But every time it was like movement to contact, and then like, I guess, we can keep going from there. And then once we linked up, I guess, with 2nd Platoon, it was, from then on, it was like, all right, you guys are QRF for the whole company. Like, every platoon that gets in contact, you're going to get there, provide heavy weapon support, and until they're dead. And that was it. And it was like, okay, like, this is real now. Like, we're not just 1st Platoon, 2nd Platoon, or 3rd Platoon getting in contact. It's every time every one of them gets in contact, we're going to be there. Let's go, right? And we were split up sometimes between, our trucks got split up sometimes. But yeah, that was it. It was game on from that whole time for a couple months.
Yeah, it was.
That's how it felt for me.
No, it was because it was when we initially got word on that on what our operation was going to be. The whole plan for the BLT was initially, we sat in Kandahar for about a month trying to figure out what we were going to do, and it was like, hey, you're going to go down into Garmser, secure Garmser, and allow another task force to go down to Fob Rhino and then reestablish Fob Rhino, which had been pretty much desolate since like 2003. And I remember the Colonel Henderson being like, yeah, 7 to 10 day mission. Yeah. So we're like, hey, plan 7 to 10 days.
10 days.
Let's pack as much dip, cigarettes, tobacco, a couple pairs of socks, and that was it. So we were pretty much just wearing what we wore because the rest of the room in our Humvees was all ammo and chow and water. Yep. And then we do that horrific movement from Leatherneck, from Kandahar to, I think it was Bastion. And then Bastion down to Dwyer, sat there for like a week, and then they start getting like reporters. They started attacking a couple of reporters to us, and I was like, no, we're not. I'm not putting a reporter in our platoon. And we're just kind of sitting around Dwyer, like just waiting to what was going to happen. I remember like trying to kill time. I remember starting to read like snippets from. I hope they serve beer in hell.
Yeah.
And it was like story time, every day.
Yeah.
I would just read one of these chapters, and it was like every day, like more and more Marines would start showing up for story time, just to kill time. And then we finally get word we're pushing down into Garmser, and then the cool thing was we were the lead platoon element going in there because the grunts were like, oh yeah, you guys are tanks, you're good. I'm like, I'm not in a freaking tank. You guys forget this. You keep on calling us tanks, but this is a Humvee, not a tank.
And
like,
an old piece of shit Humvee.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't have the same systems I do as a tank do, but it's like, yeah, you guys take lead going into Garmser at night. And they're like, hey, we're going to do like a demonstration, so I want you guys lights on the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, okay, this is great. We want to draw all the guys to the north towards us.
Yeah.
To allow the helos to come and land in.
We'd like to draw the enemy with you.
Yes. Yeah, which is great. But the cool thing was that I took point going in there, and my brother was actually the lead 53 landing in with the guys from Bravo Company.
Yeah, explain that though. Your brother.
My brother was a CH-53 pilot with the MEU as well as the air element. So unbeknownst to us at that point in time, because we just had no communication once we left Kandahar, that he was the lead 53 landing, and they got video footage of him landing where Bravo Company actually set up their OP for the duration, and with the grunts running out of there, and then we were I was the lead element going into Garmser from the north, so it was like the Lynches were leading the assault into Garmser. But yeah, 7 to 10 day
How proud was Mom?
Oh, she was pissed. Because up until that point in time, I had completely lied to her.
Okay.
I told her that we were going to be FOB security up at Kandahar.
Yeah.
And then the day before we were leaving to go down to Garmser, I called her up and I was like, yeah, I kind of been lying to you. She's like, I had a feeling you were lying to me.
Yeah, because we're going to be on the news the next day.
Yeah,
that's why you did it, because that's when all those reporters showed up.
Yeah. So luckily, when my brother's staying up in Kandahar flying every night, he was able to stay in communication. So throughout the whole 4-month duration of that mission, we were able to chat on Blue Force Tracker, and he was able to then provide reports back to my parents before we actually got a sat phone, which is like a month and a half into the mission. But I remember that first RPG coming overhead, and I'm watching it come over because we heard it coming from the south, and it was like me, you, and I think Yak was right next to us too, and we just watched this thing go over, and I remember being like, that's a lot faster than in a Red Dawn. like it's totally different outside of a tank than it is inside. And we immediately rushed. Like that to me was the realization, like this is a totally different war than what we were experiencing in Iraq. And then the shit just kicked off after that for several days. And I think it was because I kept a pretty good journal on it. It was like 43 straight days of fighting before things kind of calmed down. And then between all the fighting, and then when we pushed south on Redskins, our first real interaction with locals, I remember this guy coming up on a tractor with his kid, and the Taliban had actually dipped him in boiling water. And so we because at first we didn't know what was going on, if they just guys that were pretending to be locals or not. But then we found out, we saw the kid's burns, and we immediately were able to get him up and evac him out there. And I was like, these are some different folks that we're dealing with. Because the guy told us, he goes, it was either pick up weapons and fight against the Marines, or they were going to hurt one of them or kill them. And they refused to, so they picked them up and then dipped their kid in a vat of boiling hot water.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I think has kind of been lost over these past, 16 years since we got out. in the civilian populace. People just aren't aware of how fucking god awful and nasty the Taliban were, and they were essentially just drug lords. You know what I mean? Like they weren't fighting for the Quran. They didn't give a shit. Like, you know, the border patrol was just going down and extorting the border. Like all this is just what you expect out of a like very corrupt, you know, failed state, right? And that like the Afghans don't really think of themselves as Afghans. They align themselves with their tribes, and it matters a lot more whether they're Tajik or Pashtun. Like there's really misunderstood what was going on there, and how the Taliban essentially just came in and profited from that lack of organization, that failed state, and like just pulled a lot of the same tactics the Russians did and just treated everybody awful. There was that madrasa, that school, where they came in and they like killed all the women and children because they didn't want them learning like math and English, and they just were supposed to be learning the Quran. And we get further and further removed from that. Because I live in South Beach and everybody's on social media and all that, I'm pretty plugged into, you know, like content creation and whatnot, and keep a little bit of track on it. And there's this Andrew Tate character, right? Like he's Muslim, and there's beginning to be this like somewhat conservative movement of like, oh, the West hates Muslims because they're traditional, and like this, you know, kind of forgetting that like, and in some cases, I think recently somebody went back and read Osama bin Laden's letter, and it was up on like the Washington Post. And I think Americans have really forgotten or just never knew how fucking god awful these people were and the shit that they pulled. And these types of stories, like people are shocked when I tell them that in 2006, 2007, like I met slaves. Like we met people those people were enslaved. They were modern day slaves. We had an interpreter one time go out. We had been like firing back and forth with this like machine gun nest, and there was just this Afghan farmer just like out there harvesting opium by hand. Like two people aren't shooting machine guns over his head, and so
see who's that guy?
Yeah,
He was just eating opium.
Two scrapes for the bucket, one scrape for him.
Yep.
He's just sitting there eating his opium, harvesting it, and we go talk to him afterwards, like after everything's all cleared out with an interpreter. And he's like, all my daughters have been sold into sex slavery, and my youngest son is like a T-boy, like for the Taliban. And he's like, and I have to wake up every day and help keep that machine alive with my manual labor, and there's literally nothing I can do about it because I'm held at gunpoint. And like, I remember him talking to the interpreter, and the interpreter like relaying what they were saying. And to this day, like, I don't think I've ever seen, like, that man is totally broken. Even though like we ended up pushing the Taliban out, even if he was reconnected with his family, even if you went back and fixed everything, I don't think you come back from that just having gone through that as a man, like having to perpetuate the machine that is raping your daughters. You know, like I can't imagine a more awful fucking thought. And I think it's important, like we don't forget that. You know what I mean? There are good Muslim people, there are good Christian people, there are good Jewish people, there are good Hindu people, right? And there's god awful of both. And the Taliban is they're the scum of the fucking earth, and they don't give a shit about the Quran. They don't care about, you know. And so when people ask me like PTSD and stuff like that, I never lost a night of sleep over one of those dudes. You know, it was the other stuff that happened. You know, it was like the human element, the kids. You know, like the Marines, right? Like that's the shit that keeps you awake. It's not them, you know. Every one of them that's gone, I slept better for. It was a pretty wild experience. And then going from tanks to Humvees is kind of like lat moving, you know, inside 4 years.
Instantly.
Yeah, and it was that was one thing that I had to focus on was one is, you know, conceptualize, all right, hey, like, how do I make this as easy of a transition for all of us as possible? And I was like, hey, you know, a Humvee is just like a baby tank, you know, operated the exact same way. Where we were at in Afghanistan, operated the exact same way. You've got, you know, the driver, loader, gunner, tank commander, same thing, just transition over to a Humvee. The hard part was trying to convey that to some of the platoons that we were providing fire support for in QRF. As you know, we'd hear them troops in contacts, and we'd go roll up to them, call on the radio, hey, we're coming up from this position. And they're like, you know, they're so focused on just doing what they're doing, fighting the fight, calling in close air support or working the machine guns, that they couldn't conceptualize that whole shoot, move, and communicate at the exact same time, which was second nature to us in tanks. I remember a couple of times being told, like, hold off where you're at. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm bringing heavy machine guns to you. You tell me where the bad guys are, and I will roll past you, move in front of your position. Yeah. And that was frustrating to kind of be able to do that, but then not show that frustration to you guys in the gun truck. And that was, out of my entire deployment, I think the hardest thing was, once we transitioned to pass the heavy kinetic engagement every single day, it was another 2.5 months of just waiting. Every couple of weeks it was, hey, we're going to get ripped with these guys. The Brits are coming. This was coming. Or we're going to do this, or we're going to move here. And then 2 weeks would happen, and then nothing. And then it was, hey, next month we're going to do this. And to be able to keep morale up, because having experienced it before, when Marines start to get bored in a combat environment is when some stupid things can start to happen. So it was battling leadership, but then making sure that from the platoon, that the Raider platoon was still, morale was high, everybody was staying engaged.
Impossible task.
Yeah,
it's 130 degrees.
I know.
We're sweating, sleeping under those.
Getting sick as a dog when I was there for like a good month and a half. I mean, I think at the end Doc was giving me IVs, and then I'd go out on a patrol. I couldn't even put my boots on because my feet were so swollen. So I'd go on a patrol with my flip flops, and then come back, and then to still be able to do that, because kind of the same pieces that you were from Iraq was, if I don't go on that patrol, if I'm not there for you guys, if something were to happen, you not being able to live with that regret on not being there.
You're
to
fucked up
help
for
with
life.
that.
Like, you're 100%.
Yeah, there's no way that I could have done that.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you're like, hey, Greg, you're leading this platoon, because we had some brief, you have to go pick up the other LTs from the platoons.
Yeah.
And you're like, head north and go there. And you're like, you're leading this platoon. I'm sitting there, I'm like, corporal, what's the problem? I'm leading this platoon. I was like, okay. Ross, get on the gun, Bockham, you're driving, right? And do you remember that was when they started screwing with us, piling up the sand and the rocks and putting stuff in the road? Yeah. And on our way back, I had both LTs in the back seat. And I remember I stopped, and there was the decapitated birds. They put decapitated birds, and you know me, weird with bird stuff, and like in a pile of sand. And I was like, stop. I was like, Ross, check left, second truck, check right. So I got out, and I remember just looking at it, and I got out of the truck, and I was like, am I on live leak right now? And I was like, I'm probably on live leak. And I got out, and I waited like 10 seconds, and I was like, well, they didn't get me yet, so I don't think I'm going to be okay. And I remember I get out, and the lieutenants in the back were like, you want us to get out? You want us to pull security? You want us to get out? Because they're trying to be active, right? And I'm like, no, just let me go. And I just walked up to it, and I was so mad that the first patrol that I was in charge of, they were screwing with me. Like, they didn't do that to you. I was like, this is bullshit. And I went in there, and I just stuck my damn rifle right in there, and I didn't hear any metal sound.
Who'd you have back there? Spec Ops?
Huh?
Did you have Spec Ops back there?
No, the other two. Second platoon. And the other one,
Buckle and the guy that was from OP Overkill.
Oh, yeah, the second platoon guy. Yeah, they were both in the back. Yeah, the short, stocky guy. Yep. So they were both in the back. So I just stuck my rifle in the sand. I didn't feel anything, and I kicked it. And I was probably swearing and yelling. And I walked back there, and I get in the truck, and I look back at them, and they're like, just sitting there looking at me like I'm an idiot. And I was like, we're fine, let's go. And I'm like, just go around it. We went around it and headed that way. I'll never forget that day. But that was the first time I was like, damn, Captain Lynch, so bitch, made me do this. And now they're fucking with me right now on this day.
So we had this like pretty wild experience in Afghanistan, right? Like all of our second deployment. And then things get pretty wild. Like we all have 3 different wild experiences over the next 16 years, 3 very different paths. So Greg went right into we were in Afghanistan, and they were handing out $50,000 tax-free re-enlistment bonuses, and our enlisted leadership on that deployment at the highest level left a little bit to be desired. And that kind of had a lot to do with all of us deciding, like, well, if this is who's going to be running the show at this level, none of us are looking forward to staying in and becoming this guy. And if you and that and like not taking a shower for 4.5 months,
that'll do it.
Not seeing a woman for 4.5 months, outside of that one Air Force EOD girl.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know people that know her.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How's she doing?
I told them that story about how
She
you guys
doing-
fell in love with her. Yeah.
Oh, dude, she came down. She was okay. You haven't seen a woman in 4.5 months. She comes down in one of those tricked out Air Force MRAPs.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
to, like
With
air
coolers.
conditioning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they have
yeah.
coolers and
she's
stuff.
blonde. She's stacked, right? And she's tossing cold. I haven't had a cold drink, okay, in months. I've taken a shower. And then just this goddess, freshly groomed, shampooed hair is just tossing out cold rippets like Lady Godiva. You know what I mean? Like let them eat cake vibes. Yeah, we all fell in love for a multitude of reasons. I hope she's doing okay. She doing all right? You got her number?
Yeah, no, I do not. But I think the moment, that was the icing for you guys. But then the moment I just like, the angels opened up and started singing for you guys was when she had to make a head call. And she just went around like a mud berm that was like 4 feet high. And then just took a water bottle and just started standing there pissing into it. I know at least for Ross that sold it for him. He literally started whittling like a ring out of opium and poppy to try and wet her right then and there.
Yeah. Well, he drank that. He drank that water bottle.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was trying to sell it too, like, for money. Yeah.
There's a little in there. There's a little in there.
$5 an ounce.
So you're handing out these enlistment bonuses. Gunny Briz sits us down and it gives us the most epic re-enlistment speech I've ever heard in my life, which is, now this is on the tail. I tell civilians this a lot. It was weird getting out at that time because it was 2008.
Yeah,
and
war was bumping.
Economy was totally in the shitter, and so you had to either stay in this job, you enjoy it, right? You're cool, you're a war hero, you know, like it's people respect it, and you get 50 grand, which for a dude like me, like more money than I fucking could fathom. Or just get out and take your chances. Gunny Briz sits us down, and we're all kind of like on the side of getting out, but probably able to be convinced had you sat us down. You know what I mean? Had maybe like somebody else. But no, this man sits us down, and he's like, "Hey, they're tightening the belt around the world. I don't know if you heard about what's going on with the economy, but it's last hired, first fired. So, you know, you go out. I know you're all intelligent, and you're going to get your fancy jobs, and you're going to get your health insurance, and then you're going to find out, bam, you got cancer. And then you know, last hired, first fired. You're fired. All of a sudden, you got cancer. You got no health insurance. What are you going to do?" And there's this long pause.
What are you going to do?
There's this long pause. And I took my official position as platoon smartass. And I was like, "Gunny Briz, are you telling us that if we don't re-enlist, we're going to get cancer?" Well, I'm not saying that.
You got a higher likelihood of getting cancer by staying in.
And so we all got out.
Yeah.
Everyone came back.
Out of all of the like NCOs and below, all of you got out, I think, except for Potter.
Yeah.
And for Hardy.
And Coder. Coder re-enlisted, didn't he?
Yeah, Coder, yeah. And then he went on to not win the Medal of Honor. Yeah, and then yeah, I think there was like 80K for Potter, and there was a Sergeant Pizza with Recon.
Uh-huh.
He got, or not him, it was another guy, got 98K to re-enlist to then be a swim instructor at dive school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not bad record.
Yeah.
I mean, the you know, Pitsley, right when I got back, he was pushing hard. He had it all laid out. Tank instructor school, master gunner school, and then escape B-billet. I think you remember Sergeant Alcorn?
Yeah.
He kind of fell in line with him. He was his protege, his former gunner, and that was the thing. It's like, okay, I can do this. This is a good path. I'm not going to get stuck being a recruiter or some BS or something I don't want to do, or a drill instructor. And I thought long and hard for about 45 seconds, maybe 50. And,
really contemplated life during that time.
I was like, I'm sorry. Now, it was walking to that office and telling him no. That hurt my soul. I mean,
the dudes
really,
you respected, telling Ford and Jules and all that that sucked. Sucked a lot. Because you're kind of like looking at somebody and saying your life's not good enough for me.
Right.
Or you're worried that it'll come off that way.
And he had put the effort in to try to, he had already done so much to train me. He gave me a lot of responsibility. I could have got him blown up 1,000 times, right? So that trust he had put in me, it was kind of like I was kind of throwing that in his face, right?
Yeah.
That sucked. Sucked. But, yeah, I was glad I ended up getting out. I ended up, doing pretty well.
So then I remember this part of my time in the Marines really distinct because it's kind of unusual because I was the youngest member of the platoon, and I basically did tank school, Iraq and Afghanistan with the same set of guys, like just a smaller and smaller subset. I was like the last one to get out, and I with the exception of like Old Man and Ross because they were one class behind me,
right,
and so. But Greg, you had to extend your contract to go to Afghanistan. So when you got back, you had like 2 weeks to get your fucking life together in the worst economy that since the Great Depression, and like go find a job.
Yeah.
And we were all like eagerly watching him to be like, is he gonna make it? Because I can still re-enlist. Like, is he gonna like walk outside the gate and
just be like, smoke by a truck? Like, yeah, nope, I'm staying inside.
You're 2 weeks later.
I'll drink the water. I'll drink the water Lejeune longer. It's okay.
I made it out. I mean, I made it a week. I'm riddled with cancer. Gunny was right. But you started out in Charlotte. And you were sleeping on an air mattress in an apartment.
Yeah.
And like the nuclear security started out, like the training was $19 an hour. I remember all this stuff. You applied for this stuff on my computer.
Yep.
And we all like were like talking to you, and then you finally got your full-time gig outside of Clemson, South Carolina.
Yep.
And D Hart and I came to visit.
Yep.
And you are shacked up with college students, like beautiful women, making good money. Right, and like we go spend a weekend down there, and me and D Hart are like, hell yes, I'm getting out. Like this is fucking dope. Like, so
anything was good back then, though.
But we all looked to you, because you were the sergeant, you were NCO, right, and you were always a couple steps ahead of us, and you executed it perfectly in one of the most difficult times, right, and you got a high paying job, and that made everyone else feel like, oh, like if Greg can do it. Like, there's a high chance that I can do it, only fuck it up a little bit.
Yeah, right.
And so what was that like for you? Like, being the first one out of the gate?
It was nerve-wracking. I will say that, my family was still in Vermont at the time. They hadn't moved down to Florida yet. I call home, and I'm like, I'm getting out. I decided. And my mom's like, don't come back. Don't come back here. Vermont is tanked because at the time, like all my friends, I just finished my 4, so all of my friends had finished college and were not getting the jobs in the fields they wanted. They were all still, waitressing, bartending, manual labor, doing stuff, not utilizing their degrees. And I was like, okay, shit, like they've already got their one up on me on the education side. So, I was dating that girl in Charlotte at the time, and everything you'd read, Charlotte was like the last city in the U.S. to be economically impacted.
Yeah.
So when I moved there, it was like, okay, I have a fighting chance. If there's anywhere else, like I've got a connection. If there's a fighting chance, I'm going to go to Charlotte. And that was, it was nerve-wracking at first, and it's the weirdest thing happened. It was, I went to a barbershop, and I was debating. I was actually looking at. I went to talk to like the Navy recruiter and the Air Force recruiter and stuff, just saying, okay, I've got this in my back pocket just in case, right? As I was looking for all these jobs. But I still talked to them and just figured out my options and see if I could. Of course, every one of them was like, you're a Marine, get the fuck out. But no, it was fine. But a barber was like, hey, nuclear security, there's all these nuclear sites for Duke Energy around here. I hear they're applying. Well, I logged on, and I applied to the two of the different sites, one in Charlotte, one down there in Clemson, and got approved, and I moved down there. I went down there for, a weekend? I think it was like football season, and I was like, okay, this is the South. I didn't understand the South. You grew up in this as a Southern boy in a football climate, and I went down there, and I was like, okay, this is rad. Right when you get out, and you're like, okay, this is cool. Young, it was in the country, which I wanted. You know, mountains, lakes, a college, so there was younger people around still, and a great opportunity. I was like, bam, that's it. Like, went for it and didn't look back. So it was nerve-wracking for like a month or two, but I thankfully fell right into it. So I got lucky on that one for sure.
What was it like for you? Like, you come back, obviously you're going to pursue like a career, but then like all the dudes you just left, at least like create this bond with over the past 3.5 years, and then like they're all just gone. You know, obviously there's other like senior enlisted officers that you knew, but like a big chunk of them are just, you know, we haven't seen you in 16 years, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think I had about 2 months from the time that we got back from Afghanistan to me PCSing up to, I went to Quantico next for 2 years. And that was difficult for me. I felt like I was, you know, being forced to abandon my platoon. And like, I couldn't be there knowing that Briz's conversation with you didn't work, that you guys were all getting out. And that, to me, that was an important time for where I felt like I needed to be there for you guys. But I was transitioning up to Quantico and then jumping right into my new job up there. And I didn't have the ability to be there. And that was tough for me to get over. So I was trying to keep tabs on most of you guys the best that I could to see what you guys were doing and where you were going. And then I did about 2 years up in Quantico, and having done pumps Iraq, Afghanistan, and then going there as a mid-grade captain, walking around with a full stack on there, you know, 2 combat action rooms and all that. It was like I was there with other people from, you know, staff sergeants to lieutenant colonels with, they had like a national defense ribbon.
Yeah.
And for months it was regaling people with war stories about this a mystical place called Iraq and Afghanistan. And to go from what I was doing, and then like 2 months I was, you know, fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan, to sitting behind a desk in Quantico writing training and readiness manuals. I was like, this is not what I want to do with the rest of my career. And then transition every couple of years. And things were starting to get a little bit more serious with Katrina.
Yeah.
And she was graduating school, and I was like, you know, I want to transition out, knowing I wanted to stay with the Big Green War Machine, transition right into the reserves. So I was fortunate enough to where I was able to stay and then go right to a tank company in the reserve side of the house at Lejeune. But my career, you know, still in 2011, the economy was just barely starting to recover.
Starting to sputter, yeah.
And moving to a city like Charleston, it was a small mom and pop city, so there really wasn't a whole lot to do. I had a buddy, so I had a job lined up with SAIC to be a contractor working on the amphibious assault vehicle project. Right when I was coming off a terminal leave, I got a call from the director being like, "Hey man, like, I hate to tell you, but you know, we're getting word there's a federal hiring freeze happening, so we can't bring you onto our team." And these have already, everybody that's on the team right now and projects are frozen, I'm keeping them on of overhead. Like, I can't bring you on. So I was like, well, shit. So I, you know, had some serious internal pride that I had to suck up, and here I am finding myself walking into the unemployment office in South Carolina, being like, I literally cannot get a job right now. And that was tough. So went through that. Luckily, there was a veteran service officer that was there, pulled me in, got me set up. And then after about 3 months of growing a beard and fishing every day, the wife was like, you need to get a freaking job. So I had a buddy in the Charleston Police Department. So it was kind of a job of necessity, because I never expected to become a law enforcement officer.
Right.
Did that, immediately hired, went through the onboarding, went through law enforcement school, was pegged in the parking lot as the disgruntled Marine veteran right off the bat. So the next 10 weeks were pretty miserable, because nobody in my class really liked me except for the other Marines that were in there.
Yeah.
Because I did this thing called holding people accountable. Especially if you're overweight, and a law enforcement officer is pretty rough to deal with that.
That's a target-rich environment for that.
So then, patrol the streets of Charleston for a year. I just didn't like it. It wasn't for me. And then got a connection with a network in down here in Orlando, where there was Major Tim Dorn, Roaring Dorn. He had a buddy from another company. They were starting up down here, Ma and Pa, doing widget making for the Department of Defense. So came down here as a small project manager, and then it hasn't been easy on the civilian side of the house. And it was after a couple of years, it was like, I'm not using my brain anymore. So went back, got my master's degree, and then still doing the reserve piece. And it was tough. It wasn't an easy road to get through all that, and to still stay in the reserves, move through that, move my civilian career, starting a family, going back to school. If I've stayed idle, that's when I would have lost my mind. So it's just, if I figure if I'm too busy where I don't know what to do with my time, I've got so many things to do, then it's a lot easier than just sitting down and not doing a whole lot.
Way better.
The constant balance that we didn't deal with. You know, we were done. Our time was done.
Yeah.
And you were kept still maintaining the balance of military civilian that I can't imagine that's
I'm pretty much just using it for my TSA pre-check and my 10% discount at Lowe's. I mean, I don't know what I would do, so I figured I'd suck it up for a couple of years in the Marine Corps just so I can get my discount.
I'll go to the veteran side, you get that free meal at Applebee's, makes it all worth it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I just like bloated my plate with as much as possible. I came down and I'd saved all my money from Afghanistan, so I had like I think 28 grand, and I was able to live with my dad at his place for the first 6 months. I got a job working at an animal hospital, and you talk about like holding people accountable and like not fitting in, you know, like it was same thing. It was like 2008, 2009. So not like jobs were out there, you know, and I wanted something I could do and go to school. So I go work at Northwood Animal Hospital. I apply in my uniform. I think I was making $9.50 an hour, and I just wanted to work in the back with the dogs. I love dogs, always loved dogs, big dog guy. And
cats a lot.
Yeah, fucking hate cats. And that cemented that the year and a half I worked there. And they were like, hey, look, we really want to hire you, but we've only got 30 hours a week in the kennels and 10 up front in reception. And so it was like these like 3 cute little like FSU local student girls and then me up at the front desk. And I had been out for like, I was on terminal leave when I was working, right? So I was still in, you know, and I'm at the front desk, and this lady, so it was in the spring, and you have what's called kitten season. People like backing out of their driveway, they hear a bunch of kittens meowing, they get out, they put them in a laundry basket, and they bring them down to the animal hospital. And to them, it's the most magical fucking day of their life, right? For me, it's like you're the third one today, you know. And there's paying customers. Some of these people, they're getting ACL repairs on their Labrador Retriever. It's like $5,000 bill, you know, and they're behind the person who's turning the kittens in. It's like this crazy methed out lady who found them in a driveway, and you're dealing with her, trying to get her to sign this form. And so I informed this lady, you know, hey, we're actually all full, so they're going to go to the shelter. And she freaks out, right? And she's like, oh my God, the Tallahassee shelter is a kill shelter. Like they're gonna kill them, you know. And I'm like, no, they're like kittens. They actually do pretty well. They'll probably be adopted out in like a week. You can go check on them. We'll tell you where they're at. And she's just screaming. You know, she had read an article in the newspaper that it was a kill shelter, and so like that. The way we talk to each other just kind of kicks in. It's like just in the back of your mind. And I'm like, look, lady, I don't know what the fuck you think's going on at the shelter. If you think there's just some dude named Hank in a yellow raincoat who's just hucking kittens into a wood chipper in the back, but that's not what's going on. So you can take the kittens back home. You can leave them here. But frankly, I don't give a shit. Like, I need to get to my customers, you know? She storms off. And I just like on the next thing. I was incredibly effective receptionist, you know? Like I was just churning out, paying clientele. The next day, I get buzzed over the intercom, and it's hospital managers, it's lady Laura from Wisconsin, like typical, like kind of like Midwestern Karen type, you know. And I go in the back, and she's like, "Oh, Ryan, I just got a phone call from a customer, and she wanted to let me know that you know you. I know you didn't say this. I know, but did you mention anything about taking in kittens to somebody yesterday?" And I was like, yeah, there's a lady here, and she was like, she said that you said you were going to throw him in a wood chipper. You didn't say that, did you?
I wasn't going to throw him. Hank was.
So that's how I clarified it.
Yeah. We all know Hank.
And I'm like, no, I would never say that. And she's like, oh, thank heavens. Okay, yeah, I didn't think that you would. And I'm like, I said it's not like there's somebody at the animal shelter throwing them into a wood chipper. And she goes, Ryan, did the phrase kittens into a wood chipper come out of your mouth while wearing one of our animal hospital polos standing behind that desk? And I was like, that did happen. That's spot on. That happened. And I had to take this they made me take this like 3-day online sensitivity course.
Oh, yeah. Cured you.
Yeah. Clearly I'm fine now.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely like I got asked once at FSU, and it's like jumping out of the door of a moving car, like going military to civilian. You know, that's a small example, but the amount of people that I've met that just like they think, oh, you're a Marine, like you're just like an idiot, you know, or you're like incapable of communicating. I've had this happen in my professional career. I've had HR come to me and say things like, oh, explain to him that you're a Marine, so like your communication skills are like not the same as everybody else's. And I'm like, I've been with this company longer than I was in the Marines. If I'm an asshole, it's just because I'm an asshole. It's not because of a job I had 10 years ago for 4 years, you know? So it's like, it's definitely an adjustment.
Do you remember when we were firing all those rounds through the coax? It was funny. I saw a meme the other day, and it was like, hey, machine gunners, do you know if you keep firing until the barrel seizes to the gun, you don't have to be a machine gunner anymore? I said it to a bunch of people. I was like, not if you're a tanker. I was like, let that bitch let that bitch glow white and watch the rounds go through it from the outside.
We were all in that tank that day at Fort Pickett.
I don't know if it was. Yeah, I think it was a Pickett or was it Cax? We're knocking down targets.
That was Cax. That was at rain. That was at North End. That was after we'd done that whole assault in the breach. That's after we'd waited for that freaking Miklik to go off for 3 hours when he almost died.
Yeah.
And then we just had all this ammo, and that's when I had with Glossy Lips, where he's off to my right, and we're laying waste to all these targets, and we're just going through thousands of rounds, and then I get a call. It was Bufamani. Was our coyote, and he's like, yeah, ceasefire, we're gonna let the grunts move in over here. And I'm like, all right. And then I look over, and then there's freaking Glossy Lips still freaking throwing 50 cal rounds down range. I'm calling him on the net, yelling at him. He's not listening.
Yeah.
And then I for some reason, I just open up my TC sats, jump off our tank, run over, and somehow I just like levitate up onto the top of his tank and just start grabbing brass.
Yeah,
because he had the TC sats open, and I'm just grabbing brass, throwing it down on the top of his head. He looks up at me. And I'm just like, cease fucking fire, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's grunts 100 yards to your right. Like,
yeah.
But he was so focused on his target that he wasn't looking around. Oh yeah, I was
still in gunner mode, not
yeah.
tank
So,
mode.
but right before then was when we were just like, it was like, you know, what's a small man burst? Yeah, about 1,000 rounds.
Yeah.
On
We
the
went
coax.
we threw a whole 4,000 round burst without changing out the barrel once.
Yeah, we had the main gun elevated all the way up. We're hitting targets about 2,800 meters out.
Yeah, I remember because I would laze the target, and I had the computer open, and I hit reset, and I'd raise it again. I hit reset. I was way beyond even the computer adjusting for trajectories.
Oh yeah, because we could see the impacts.
But I remember I was holding it back. I was trying to hold it back, and I flipped the tray over it. Boom! Round went off right in my face.
Yeah.
And you were like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." And then you burst out laughing. You're like, "You're not going to do that again."
You started laughing.
I started laughing. I was nervous.
You were there. This was at Pickett. This was at Pickett.
Sure?
Yeah, because we were shooting down the Iron Mikes. We were doing the combined arms infantry integration, but we were doing it with 1.6. I remember that because I remember like being up in the loaders, like yelling at people I recognized because they lived across the street from me, and you had shot so many Iron Mikes that your barrel was starting to glow, and like you could see the rounds going through it.
Yeah, white.
And then you got a runaway gun.
Yep. I remember that. Yeah.
And you were there. You were in the TCs, and you just grabbed the pull chain and held it back, and then flipped open the feed tray, and the round that was on the tray cooked off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we were both like, "Are you?" Because everything just filled with smoke. You couldn't see anything.
Oh yeah, it's the freaking gas.
And it was like, "Greg, are you okay?" And you just got your hands over the tray, and you're like, "Ah!"
I was nervous.
Oh yeah.
But I remember it happened again. It happened twice in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, I'm stupid. But it was so freaking hot.
Well, once the barrel starts glowing, you should probably back off a little bit.
Usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot. That was so funny. That was a good time though up there. Yeah. So when we were talking about the time at Pickett when you finally released us. This is going to be a dry op.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be a dry op, and you guys, look, I'm going to let you guys have fun. If you get me in trouble, I'm going to whoop your ass. And it was it. And it was like, put your flight suits on, take off your name tapes. And I just remember that, and us all going down, and like, we all sat there and like, all right, you're going to go that way, you're going to go that way, and we all went in pairs to the PX. And you remember everybody be like, what are you guys doing? Like, asking us why we're buying alcohol. Like, why we're getting...
Because they recognized our faces.
Yeah.
They didn't quite know who you were with, yeah.
But like, Ross ain't fooling anybody into thinking that he's a staff NCO or officer at that time. You know what I mean? None of us were.
No.
Nobody believes Coder is like a second lieutenant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then we had that wild night with recon upstairs.
Oh, they were so pissed the next morning because they were still running like stay ops that we were keeping them awake because those guys were coming back to get some sleep.
Yeah.
And the next morning we're like just trash cans full of beer cans, and I'm like, all right, it's like go several blocks away and put those strategically in different dumpsters. And then the next morning when we have our stand up with the battalion commander, all the officers, the staff NCOs are there, and then the OPSO, Major Kennedy, Major Clinton, whatever his name was talking, and right at the very end he was like, gents, just again want to reiterate, this is a dry op, we've only got a couple of days left here. He goes, apparently, we'll make sure the word gets over to the CLB and the aviation guys, because it looks like some of those guys were over here buying some drinks last night. And I look over at it was Dave Lee, the recon platoon commander, looks over at me, just fucking staring through my soul. And I'm like, yeah. What are you gonna do? Bulk fuel, you can't control those guys.
Party animals over there in bulk fuel.
Oh my god, that was a good time.
Nobody gets down like bulk fuel.
We didn't get you in trouble though.
No.
Yeah, you guys did a good job. That was the one thing.
No, it's so weird to look back and think about it being 16 years ago. I got promoted out of Pickett. That's where I picked up corporal.
Yep.
And that, like, being able to do that was nice. You know what I mean? To celebrate, like, a little bit, just that whole experience. We went to Pickett twice, right?
We went to Pickett, and then we went to the West Virginia. Remember? We're the West Virginia National Guard. Don't get twisted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I do remember that guy. The big fat... Is it like a beard?
Well, the berms weren't even built right, so we couldn't even do the engagements correctly. So what did we do? You were like, guys, these idiots don't even know how to build berms.
Millions of dollars, yeah. And then they ended up jacking all that. I think that was at it was AP Hill. I think AP Hill. Yeah, one of the two. Yeah. They built everything wrong and all jacked up. We couldn't even shoot off of them and do our gunnery, and so we had to do like a modified gunnery. And I think Jules and Hillard came down to be our master gunners for that evolution, and they still waved the magic wand, and we were good to go.
Yep.
For that, yeah.
That was one of the sketchiest things ever. Was pulling the tanks onto those trains. That was one of the sketchiest moments I remember because it was 10 feet on both sides and it was elevated too. Yeah. So if the tank fell off, I mean, it was game over. People were, it could have taken the whole train over. Yeah, so I remember pulling up in there, and it's sticking out on both sides, on each side.
It's
and I was like, Ross, I was like, I trust you, and it was like you and I guiding people on.
Yeah.
And we only let 2 other people drive. We didn't let anybody drive because it was so sketchy.
You're literally driving a tank, and it's hanging off a little bit on both sides. You're putting up on a rail cart or a low boy. Right. And I would have these moments where I would just look around and be like, there's nobody that's this is 68 tons. on top of what I assume is a very expensive commercial vehicle, and a $4 million M1A1, and we're going to do this 4 times. Yeah. And all the officers, staff, NCOs are off doing and there's no one above the age of 21.
Yeah, let's put the 19-year-olds in charge. This work good. Totally easy. Yeah. You guys are all trained. I've literally been in the Marine Corps for 6 days. You're good.
Yeah, you're good. You got it. Just get it on that thing.
Yeah.
The sketchiest thing I ever did in the Marine Corps was actually back stateside. I don't remember man, I don't remember who. I was in the barracks. Some other company was out training, and they had loaded a tank in the low boy, and I think I was the duty driver that day. I can't remember, but they needed somebody to drive out in front of the low boy carrying the tank, and then to take him over this bridge. And the guy told me, but I didn't really pay attention kind of what I needed to do. Dude, I'm driving in front of you out to the range. I got it. You know what I mean? This is going to be boring as shit. I can only go 15 miles an hour. This is stupid. And I got over this bridge, and then I noticed he wasn't behind me. He's, and so I'm like, fuck. So I stop in the road. And then I was kind of I don't know if I was digging with my phone or whatever, but I look up and he's behind me and just barreling ass. And I can see him in my rearview mirror like this. Just waving at me to go. And so I stomp on the gas, and he gets pretty close to the tail end of the car. And we pull in, and he starts, we finally get where we need to go. He gets out, he starts screaming at me. He's like, I can't hit, there's a tank on this thing. My brakes don't work. You know, so he's like, I was just gonna plow through you, like, and just completely disintegrate you.
Yeah.
You know, because it's the weight of his semi truck plus 68 tons.
Yeah, the brakes aren't gonna do anything.
Nothing. Like he's like, they're notional. They're fucking notional brakes on this thing. You know, like, and especially going downhill. That's probably, barring some like directly driving over some IEDs in Iraq. Like I think 3 times I drove over either something detonated on behind us, or like we got radio calls that they had been digging there. We had time to call EOD out. Yeah. That was probably the closest I came to dying.
We were. That's what we were talking about when we broke for a second. Was, do you remember when we were in Garmser and we had went back and then we went somewhere? I mean, you gotta think, we were QRF, we were supply. Remember we load the back full of mortars? I couldn't even get down on the turret. We had so many mortars in the back of these Humvees. If we had the slightest little IED, I mean, it would have been game over. It would have sent us forever. But do you remember when we were driving, we were going there and coming back, and we had seen in that one low spot where it was all moon dust.
Yeah.
And that IED, there was an IED on a pressure plate, and we had hit it so many times, it was exposed now.
Yeah.
It just never went off.
Yeah.
And we went over it, like the whole platoon went back over it twice.
Oh, the minor roll even on the 7-ton went over that thing. Yeah, it just looked like, everybody was like, God, they just looked like a piece of like
trash
pallet.
out there.
Yeah, it looked like a piece of broken wood from a pallet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got out, and
It was
like,
an IED.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was like, I think it was like one of those yellow jugs of HME. I think there was like 50 pounds of HME.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that would have rocked our world.
Oh yeah. That's one thing I will say. I admire the shit out of you for always being the lead, because we knew those were all victim initiated, right?
Yeah.
And I also hated you because I was your gunner. And I knew I was going to get smoke check too.
I was in the vehicle behind you. Yeah. Oh yeah. And that was something that I mean, for me, it was always, I did the same thing in Iraq. Normally, it was I'll always lead a patrol, and then in Afghanistan, it was the same thing. It was, I was like, if it's going to be somebody, it's going to be me, and if I would have felt worse if it was somebody else in front of me.
Yeah.
So I just always led the patrols. I don't know why. I just kind of seemed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
That's the way that I wanted to do it. So.
Well, Moore and Boomer were the 2-tank in Iraq and didn't help them at all.
No. Yeah. I mean, the 2-tank, notoriously gets swacked anyway. So I was like, I'll just put myself first, make it a little bit easier. So.
Make myself simultaneously look better and also increase my rate of survival.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those big IEDs, they hit like a. Well, first of all, karma was always karma. It was always a disaster.
That was a
right.
nightmare,
So I was
yeah.
thankful you guys were up there operating a lot more than we were. Thankful, like we always hit pressure plates. Like,
Yeah.
Especially in Habanilla, it was pressure plate. Remember when you came after your mom had passed?
Yeah.
And you came you came out just to put track back on with us that day.
Yeah.
That was actually a fun day for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just pressure plate. So when we hit them, it wasn't as big of a deal, you know, for where we were anyways.
There's so many interesting pieces of all of it. Like, one, I think in that whole experience, the environments that we were in, like just the 7 to 10 day mission that turned into 4.5 months, right? And then also being in 130 degree heat and kind of what resulted out of that.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember we went on and then getting our supplies essentially, right? We didn't expect to be there for 7 to 10 days. Nobody brings enough water, enough food, ammunition. And so we start to run out of that stuff. And the human element in that, I remember Snyder, who would go on like after he got out to be a competition bodybuilder and like do very well, but he had this perception that he was going to go on the Mew and bulk up, and so from his, you know, he did it.
Do you like goat meat?
He did it the safe, responsible way. He's like, I'm going to go on a Mew, I'll be able to eat. So he bulked up the whole year, and then we go there, and he's just a ginger and getting sunburned nonstop. I was the best man at his wedding. Like so like we were all at his wedding. And I was his best friend, and he was so angry and so sunburned, and we were all so miserable and depressed. Flies everywhere.
Oh my God, the flies!
I'll never forget.
Laying duct tape down to see who could catch the most flies in a matter of minutes inside our
Remember we
Humvees.
tried to pack like every hole in the Humvee to try and stop them from. We'd all lay down, take a nap, wake up, and they're all over your face, all over.
You just had to accept it.
That video of Seymour, and he's like, the flies.
My friends.
They're my only real friends out here. But I go over to Snyder, and we're just hanging out, and he's up on his gun, and I finish an MRE, and I put all the trash back in the bag, and I start a conversation with Mitch or something. I like left it down by my boot, I told this story on stage at his wedding when I was doing the best man toast. I was like, "This is the guy you're marrying," and I left and then came back like a few hours later. He's in the exact same spot, and he's just like, "Hey Taylor, if you ever leave MRE trash in my Jeep or my Humvee again, I'm gonna slit your fucking throat." Like, dead serious. Yeah. You know, we were so miserable and so on. It was so hot, like. And just how dictated you were by the climate and the environment. Like, you had to pick out where you were going to sleep based off of where the sun was going to come up so that you were in some kind of shade.
And the water you drank was hot, and like everything was just miserable.
Do you guys remember when they airdropped the water and it fucking exploded?
Yeah.
We had to, because we were the only Humvees there, so we had to drive out in the middle of the fucking desert.
Yeah, just go pick up pallets and pallets of plastic water.
Yeah, and it was wild how much of it didn't survive.
Yeah.
Like, there were not that many.
Remember when the Cobras came over, and they just came. It was towards the end of the deployment. They came over and they were real low. And we're like, what the fuck are they doing? And we all look up, and it's the grunts are pissed. They're getting their little improvised volleyball net getting blown all over. They're blowing everybody's tents off, and everybody's just getting pissed. All of a sudden, the hatch opens on the Cobra, and these 2 boxes of Girl Scout cookies just get chucked out.
Yeah, airdropped.
Dude, those dudes, like, you would act like kids on Christmas, like when those Girl Scout cookies, they're rationing out like 2 apiece, like a bread line.
You guys remember One Tree Hill?
Yes, I still joke around with people about One Tree Hill. Like, that was our go-to after every patrol.
It was all we had.
Yeah, but it was Mystery Alaska.
Okay.
Do you remember that night?
Yeah, I do.
That's the night we got rocketed.
Remember I ran, so the TV was on, so we're all sitting there like kids story hour with it on the Humvee hood, and we're all sitting there, and it was one of those Chinese 107s, and it landed right behind our truck.
Yeah.
And
Shrapnel comes flying over, everybody's ducking.
Everybody jumps up, and I don't know why. I made fun of so much. I grabbed the computer. I grabbed it and I shoved it. Yeah. And everybody's putting it on their body armor and their Kevlars and shit. And I get in there and I put it in there. And everybody, you look at me, you're like, Greg, where is the fucking computer? Get your fucking shit off. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Dude, I remember that night. I remember that mostly because, one, we didn't really get attacked at night very much.
No.
You know, they did, obviously that they don't have like night vision capabilities and whatnot.
Unless we have a laptop open that they can clearly target.
Giant moonbeam says, "Hey, we're here."
That was one of the first nights that like wasn't shitty and didn't suck.
Yeah,
it was actually cool that night.
Yeah, it was. I was just gonna say, like, it had cooled down. I think like we had gotten like food resupply. We were good. Like, nobody was hungry. Nobody was dehydrated, and we were actually enjoying sitting around. Like, if somebody had gotten mystery, I don't know how we got it through some care package or we were sitting around. And you remember. Yeah, you're sitting there watching it, you're getting involved in the plot, the storyline of the movie, you almost fucking forget that you're in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And then, and there's a fucking, rocket going off, and you're back in Afghanistan. But it was a truly fucking miserable experience.
I'm pissed. They made me, you remember I had that back end, the little spinner part of the rocket.
Yeah.
I had saved that, and they made me, they made us dump all our pieces and shit.
I wish
I saved that, man. I had that rocket in from that one.
There was so much stuff that I wish I'd saved because when we were doing the fucking TSA examination or whatever, it's all just other Marines.
Yeah.
And just looking at your shit.
Yeah, the enlisted guys know I would have stored that shit with you if I knew that.
Dude,
I walked right through with everything.
I know.
So yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Dude, so I cleared my bag and they were telling me what I couldn't take. Yeah. And so I had like this one bag that had already cleared. And as they were telling me what I couldn't take, I was taking it out and just putting it in the bag that I just, like, right in front of the guy, And then he's like, that bag's already good, right? And I'm like, yeah, and I zip it up. But I'd already got rid of a bunch of shit that I knew I wasn't going to be able to bring, fucking brass and, that kind of shit. I think we probably cap it off here. We covered a lot. It should turn out really awesome. I think this one's going to be good.
Yeah.
That's it.